Hi guys, welcome back to Kim's class. The next 3 units will explore each of the 3 time tenses for verbs. In the first unit, we'll look deeper into the present tense by including aspects of the present tense. We'll learn about the simple present, present continuous, present perfect, and present perfect continuous. Then we'll do the same with the aspects of the past tense. And then, of course, in Unit 3, we'll talk about the 4 aspects of the future tense. I found that teaching that all 12 units together, with all of the tenses together, can be a little more confusing than when I teach a time tense all together. I hope I'm right. After each video, there will be a link to an activity for you to practice what you have learned. You'll find the link in the description of each of the videos. Let's talk about why mastering verbs is important. In English, it's possible to express several different tenses through a combination of words as well as by changing the form of the verb. Understanding these tenses allows you, the writer and speaker, with a clearer presentation of the sequence of events and the passage of time described in your writing or in your speaking. So let's take a look at these verb tenses all together. Remember, in each lesson, I'll be talking about each time tense differently. So verb tenses come in 3 times: past, present, and future. Each one of these time tenses has 4 aspects. For example, simple, continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous. Take a look at example sentences for each of these time tenses and the aspects. I won't read them for you, but I suggest you pause your video and write these sentences that you see in the chart. Writing down what you have learned will help you learn it clearer, better, and faster. Pause your video and write these sentences down. Don't worry if it seems a little overwhelming. Remember, I'm going to break each of the 3 time tenses into separate lessons. For each lesson, we'll talk about what the tense is, when it's used, and how to use it. So in the last lesson, we explored the 4 aspects of the present tense. In this lesson, we're going to look at the past tenses. I'm going to start with an overview of all of the aspects, then talk about each aspect individually, compare some of the aspects together, and then take a close look with an opportunity to practice what you've learned. Let's look at the basic comparison of the 4 aspects of the past tense. On your screen, you'll see a basic overview of the 4 aspects. You might want to pause the video and write this chart down. Take special note of the timeline. This could be helpful to write down as well. Remember, writing things in your own handwriting has proven to help store the information in your brain far better than just looking at something. There are, of course, other descriptions and other examples of each of these aspects than what you see here. This is why I'm going to go over in more detail each of these aspects in the next few slides. Pause your video, write this information down if you'd like. Let's go ahead now and start with the past simple. The past simple is very common and a basic part of the English language. Generally speaking, we form the past simple by adding the two letters ed to the main verb. However, in English, there are hundreds of irregular verbs. We're not going to get into specifically each of those irregular verbs, but I know you know the importance of learning these irregular verbs. Let's look at when you might use the past simple tense and a few examples. We use the past simple to talk about an action that began and was completed in the past. I graduated in 2004. It's completed. He planted flowers yesterday, or he planted flowers last Sunday. Completed. She left home 2 years ago. Get it? We also use the past simple to talk about routine actions in the past. We called her every day. Routine. He walked with his mom often. I spoke to my daughter regularly. Take notice to the two irregular verbs, left and spoke. Now, just like the present tenses that we've learned in the last lesson, you can also form positive, negative, or interrogative, which means a question, sentences with the past simple. Let's go ahead and look at a chart with some examples. In the positive, we would say, I worked, you worked, we worked, they worked, he worked, she worked, I worked. In the negative, I did not work, you did not work, we did not work, they did not work, he did not work, she did not work, it did not work. When we're asking a question in the past simple, it sounds like this. Did I work? Did you work? Did we work? Did they work? Did he work? Did she work? Did I work? You may have noticed that in the positive, the verb worked does not change. This is one of the advantages of the past tense. You just need to know one form of the verb. Well, of course there are those pesky irregular ones. You may have also noticed that in both the negative and the interrogative, the present form of the auxiliary verb do changes to did, and the main verb stays in its base form, work. And just like we talked about in the present tense lesson, it's more common and formal to not use contractions when writing. Although it's perfectly okay to say didn't when we're speaking, on most exams you should try to follow this formal rule. Now let's look at the past continuous. The past continuous is sometimes called the past progressive. Remember, we talked about how it used to be called the progressive, but most linguists and your textbooks are now calling it the continuous. Just like the present continuous is formed using the to be, and then the base verb plus the three letters ing. But Remember, because it's in the past, the to be verb needs to be in the past. That means we're either using the word was or were, and then the base verb plus ing. There are two different uses of this form that all suggest an ongoing act in the past. The first reason why we would use this form is that the past continuous expresses an activity that was in progress, which means it was happening at a particular point in time in the past. They were walking the dog last night. This indicates that the action happened in the past, last night, and that was the particular point in time. The same is with the next sentence. She was brushing her teeth at 9 a.m. Was indicates past, and 9 a.m. was the definite time that she was doing something. Martin was sleeping by 8 p.m. The second use is used to describe one action in the past that was interrupted by another action. So now that we have gone over when to use the past continuous, let's look at the positive, negative, and interrogative forms of this aspect. Just like in every tense we have studied so far, you can form the positive, negative, or interrogative sentences using the past continuous. Let's look at the positive. I was working. You were working. We were working. They were working. He was working. She was working. It was working. In the negative, I was not working. You were not working. We were not working. They were not working. He was not working. She was not working. It was not working. When we're asking questions using the past continuous, it sounds like this. Was I working? Were you working? Were we working? Were they working? Was he working? Was she working? Was it working? Again, be careful of the contractions. We usually write out the full contraction for was not and were not when we are writing or when we are speaking formally. But in informal speaking, feel free to use the contraction form wasn't and weren't. On most exams, it's better to follow this rule. So now that we have briefly discussed the past continuous, let's go ahead and look at the past perfect. For the rest of this lesson, I will focus on the other two aspects of the past tense, past perfect and past perfect continuous. These two aspects can be a little difficult, even for native speakers. I'll do a brief explanation of each, like I did with the simple and the continuous, and then I'll spend some time comparing the two. Let's go ahead and start with the past perfect. If you remember from the lesson on the present perfect, the present perfect uses has or have before the participle. But in the past perfect, we only need to use had before the past participle. There are two specific times when we use the past perfect. The first time we use the past perfect is when we're describing a completed action before something in the past. The past perfect expresses the idea that something occurred before another action in the past. It can also show something happened before a specific time in the past. Look at the sentences you see now. I had never seen such a beautiful beach before I went to Kauai. I did not have any money because I had lost my wallet. She only understood the book because she had watched the movie. Do you see how that action was completed? Another time that we would use this tense is to talk about a duration before something happened in the past. We use that past perfect to show that something started in the past and will have continued up into another point in the past. Let's look at those example sentences now. We had had that car for 10 years before it broke down. By the time Alex finished his studies, he had been in London for over 8 years. They felt bad about selling the house because they had owned it for more than 40 years. So do you see how the past perfect is used to refer to an activity that took place either once or many times before another point in the past? It can also show that something happened before a specific time in the past. As I read those examples, I want you to try to find was the action what it was and what event took place before the action. Go back and watch that and see if you can figure out what the event was and what the action that happened before. So, just like in all of the previous aspects, you can form positive, negative, and interrogative sentences using the past perfect. But before I show you the examples, remember that the sentences you're going to see on your screen are very short. Remember that in order for them to mean what you want them to mean, there needs to be an event that took place before the event was written. So let's look at the chart and I'll explain a little bit more in detail. In the positive, the short form of these sentences sound like this. I had worked. You had worked. We had worked. They had worked. He had worked. She had worked. It had worked. In the negative, I had not worked. You had not worked. We had not worked. They had not worked. He had not worked. She had not worked. It had not worked. When we're asking questions in the past perfect, it sounds like this. Had I worked? Had you worked? Had we worked? Had they worked? Had he worked? Had she worked? Had it worked? So, even though all the sentences say had worked, in order to use this tense correctly, there needs to be additional information. I had worked before I had children. I had not worked until 2004. Had I worked at the school when you started? Like I said on the last slide, there is no other verb change in with the pronouns. We use the verb had with all the pronouns. So now that we've briefly discussed the present perfect, let's look at the present perfect continuous. The past perfect continuous is formed using had plus the word been plus the present participle with the letters ing. We use the past perfect continuous to show that something started in the further back past and then continued up until or overlapped another time in the past. For 5 minutes and for 2 weeks are both durations which can be used with the past perfect continuous. Notice that this is related to the present perfect continuous. However, the duration does not continue until now. It stops before something else in the past. In a minute, I'll help you look at these two forms side by side. Using the past perfect continuous before another action in the past is also a good way to show cause and effect. Take a minute and write down these example sentences that you see on the screen. I'm not going to read them for you now. So just like in the previous aspects, you can form positive, negative, or interrogative sentences using the past perfect continuous. Let's take a look at the chart. Remember, pause your video at any time to write down some of these example sentences. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide. However, I really do suggest that you do pause the video, as I hope you did with the others, and write these sentences down. What I will do before the close of this lesson is compare these two tenses, the past tense, and the differences between the past continuous and the past perfect continuous, because these are the two aspects that kind of can cause some confusion. So let's take a look at the differences between the past continuous and the past perfect continuous. So look at the examples that you see on the screen. Understand that if you do not include a duration, like for 5 minutes, or for 2 weeks, or since Friday, many English speakers choose to use the past continuous rather than the past perfect continuous. Be careful, because this can change the meaning of the sentence. Past continuous emphasizes an interrupted action, whereas the past perfect continuous emphasizes a duration of time before something in the past. Let's look at these examples and help understand maybe the differences. So look at the sentence, he was tired because he was exercising so hard. This sentence emphasizes that he was tired because he was exercising at that exact moment. But now let's look at the other example. He was tired because he had been exercising so hard. This sentence emphasizes that he was tired because he had been exercising over a period of time. It is possible that he was still exercising at that moment, or that he had just finished. I realize that there was a lot of information in this video. I do hope, however, that teaching all 4 aspects of this tense side by side helped you see things a little clearer. Although there's nothing more than I would like to teach you face to face with all of you here in an actual classroom, there is an advantage to having these lessons in video format. Can you guess what that is? You can pause the video, write notes, answer and ask questions you might have, and even watch the information or the instruction again. Remember, like I said, writing down the information in the charts and writing example sentences helps you understand the concepts more thoroughly. Additionally, don't forget that I have made activities to help you practice what you learned here in this video. You'll find links to those activities in the comments section below. You also may see a link to another video in my Action English series or in my Street Talk series. This will give you more practice in putting these tenses together and learning some of the contractions that you might have seen in the previous lesson. But for now, that concludes today's lesson. But before you go, I'd like to ask you to do a few things. If you enjoyed this video, would you please like this video? Also, I'd love it if you subscribed to this channel. That way, every time I post a new video, you'll be notified. Wouldn't you like that? Another thing that you can do is share this video. I bet you know people in your community that might benefit from learning the lessons that you learned today. The last thing I'd like you to do is write a comment in the comment section. I can't be here in class with you face to face, but I would love to hear from you. So write me a comment in the section below. Tell me how much you enjoyed the video or even any questions that you might have. I'd love to hear from you. And lastly, please don't forget what a blessing it is for me to share this passion with you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to come on this journey with you to learn English. Goodbye for now. I really hope I'll see you soon.